In today's Technical Corner, well, it could even be our first ever feature-led Technical Corner. It's going to be a long one. I'm joined with Ian from DC Swiss, and he's going to tell us all about the company, and we're going to show our wider community what the company offers. Welcome, Ian. Let's get started. Who are DC Swiss?
DC Swiss are one of the finest manufacturers of thread cutting tools anywhere in the world. They're obviously manufacturing a wide range of solid round tool threading tools. DC Swiss UK are a member of the group of companies owned by DC Swiss, and then on top of that we have international partners all over the world, basically reselling and technical support all over the globe.
And if we look at some of these products here, is this what makes you different? You're threading experts, I suppose, aren't you? We've talked previously about how you get an inquiry and someone says, I want an M8 hole. It's a through hole. Yep. You need a lot more information than that, don't you?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we like a lot more information of that. We don't always get that luxury. We have to cope with what we're given. There's so many decisions to be made, and that's why we ask so many questions, so that we can actually build up a picture of the feature that the customer's wanting to achieve, and do it in the most optimum way. We've got that many options. You know, we can tap, we can roll, and we can mill, all to get to the same solution. I think, for instance, M10, there's something like 30 or 40 different ways to produce an M10 hole. So yeah, there's a number of questions to be asked.
But you're known for probably arguably high performance threading tools. You know, would that be a fair statement? You're the top end in terms of performance?
Yeah, definitely. Everything that the Swiss company tries to produce is aimed at the optimum performance in that type of material group. Material derives everything. So everything that we actually produce is to achieve optimum performance in. This is what our customers have come to expect from DC. We sometimes get labelled with the special tool application rather than the whole threading market, in that we can achieve the best possible performance even in a mild steel or an aluminium or something that's very free cutting. And it's not always needs to be Inconel that we get as an option.
Sure, many manufacturers of cutting tools, including threading tools, they look for arguably economies of scale. So they talk about universal tools where they want to produce a thread mill for all materials. Would DC Swiss fall into that category, or would you fall into the other category where, no, we do believe we need a stainless tap, a cast iron tap, a Inconel tap, for instance?
Yeah, it's a great question because, yeah, historically DC has always attitude that we've produced specific tooling for specific applications and material groups. So when you look at the DC range, it's built up of different cutting geometries, different application groups to suit whatever the customer is actually trying to achieve.
And just on this table alone, you've got a lot of products, and I know this is only the start of it, but how on earth how do you decide the best product to sell, or do you put it onto the onus onto the engineer and onto the client, the customers?
Yeah, a little bit of 50-50 really. I mean, we can give as much advice and information as we want to do. The customer will have the deciding factor, because he will know whether there is needed an added security in the process, which will then determine whether he thread mills or whether he taps. Okay, everybody's pocket's different, and the customer will know exactly what that product means, or component will mean to him. We can't guarantee that a tap won't break, but we can put in the best possible application for that tool, and we convert more milling business back to tapping today than ever, really.
Yes, and it's a long conversation really, but just tell us why that is.
Well, the rush to milling was driven by, probably back in the 90s, was driven by two scenarios, two situations. Customers who had not yet had an exposure to products like this, to application tools, A little bit of a limited ability at that time, so maybe with 718 or something like that, the technology wasn't there to tap it, so they did go to thread milling in that particular application. The other aspect is that indexable manufacturers brought in solid carbide tools, and they didn't have the tapping expertise or the portfolios, so they went in a thread milling route as well. So more and more customers went in that direction.
But a lot of people say to me it's down to the size. If it's a large, if it's a large tap, typically they'll go for a thread mill. But you do taps over 100 millimeters, believe it or not. So again, how does that influence the decision?
Yeah, I mean, again, if you're as old as me, you were used to selling M120 and above regularly back in the 80s and 90s. But you're right, nowadays, the vast majority of threading over M30 is done with a indexable thread mill, and rightly so. However, in some high volume applications, say like an M42 in cast iron, maybe 2 or 3 times D for the power industry, we've still got a very, very nice product that works extremely well tapping. In fact, we've got an example in front of us. That's exactly the tool. Yeah,
well, we're talking about these. Let's just run through some of these taps.
Right, okay. People may or may not be aware of how a tool is selected when we're talking about tapping. The 2 most important areas is hardness or tensile strength of the material and the elongation. Now, some DC customers will be well aware of the grid, the graph that we use to actually show that. And we have obviously hardness, tensile strength going one way and elongation going the other. Some customers don't even consider elongation. For us, for tapping, it's extremely important how much that material will move.
Can I roll it? Do I have to cut it?
Yeah, exactly that. Yeah, and so if it's very hard, or if you've got high tensile steels, it's right up at that top end with very low elongation. But if it's at this end of the grid, you've got a W geometry, as we call it, the yellow banded tap. That's for extremely extruded aluminium, extremely soft aluminiums. Going the other way, with high elongation, you've got your stainless steels, ferritic, mosmetic, and so on and so on. So that really puts us in a good category again to actually select the geometry of the tap. Or what we need to know then is how we build up the hole detail, whether it's through, blind, whether it's very deep, whether there's counterbores, what lubrication is, whether horizontal, vertical, and the list goes on until we've got all the details and we can select exactly the right tap. So again, here we have a more traditional set of cutting taps. With that in mind, we've got some more specific tools, which are these tools here for very, very long holes for 4 times D. This tool is actually called the swarf breaker, and what this tool does is it breaks the chips into very small pieces, and then it blows the chips out of the hole using extreme power on through coolant. The Z Inox tool is an extremely capable product. Okay, the new Z Inox that came along 5 or 6 years ago is a fabulous product. It really is a market leader throughout the stainless ranges. Lots of denominations, lots of capability, and these tools they really need to be used to be understood, because they are exceptional at what they do.
So when we look at these, you put them into material groups. Why is that?
It's the key factor. It's the point that we need to begin the process of deciding what tool we're actually going to operate with.
Okay, so we've run through a number of taps. Is there anything else you want to show us?
Yeah, I want to talk about 2 really important taps to the industry, and first of all, it's our rigid tapping product. As you can see from the information when we spoke about the specific geometries before, and the grids that we're talking about, the graphs that we're talking about, you can see the traditional type of products up at the top left. the more specific tools, the K geometry, the swarf breaker that we mentioned before, cast iron, titanium and super alloys, all those are geometries available for specific areas of tapping. But rigid tapping is now the most common area, if you like, for the British market. And if you have a multi-material demand, okay, relatively free cutting, so you've got aluminium, free cutting stainlesses, cast irons, foil graphite, and so on, then it is really the go-to tool. It's a fantastic product. It's got a really wide range of sizes, denominations, extra length, through coolant, and so on. And it's been driven many years ago now by that movement to rigid tapping applications on various machine tools.
And I guess that's what the video's portraying, isn't it? You've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different materials there.
That's right, exactly that. But the key to this is that you must be rigid tapping with it. Because of the form changes that have been had to make to this tap, because it was driven predominantly for high volume, high speed machining. So they have to make corrections to the form. You put that tap into a classical tension compression tapping box and you will not produce a size thread.
Okay.
So it has to be driven from a rigid tapping application, which moves us on to the machine tools that are out there and the little bit of extra help that they need to actually make the tapping performance the very best that it possibly could be. And what I mean about that is the actual holding of the tap.
Sure.
Okay. So people possibly around the country may be aware of synchro tapping boxes. When rigid tapping first came to market, the machine tool men actually sold it so that you don't need a synchro box, you don't need a tapping box, so you could hold it in an ER collet. This is a mechanical process, okay? In various ages of life of your machine tool, okay? So it's very possible when we're talking about microns of classification and tolerance on the pitch diameter of a tap, that we're going to get problems and we're going to get issues. Even I'll give you the example of a big large machine tool, maybe a BT50 or something of that nature, tapping an M2 hole. Okay, as engineers you can see the issue there. You can see the possibilities of such a heavy product being driven into the job, okay, and then driven back out of the job constantly under power. All right, the best analogy I've ever seen is asking someone a human being to jump up in the air but land with solid knees. Don't bend your knees, okay? The problems come always at the bottom of the hull. The vast majority of problems come at the bottom of the hull. You've got to slow down, stop and retract, all done in pitch, sometimes at very high speed. We can tap up to 60 meters a minute with these products, okay? So to do that, okay, you need something to absorb that amount of pressure. All right, so whatever people think, it is very, very possible. It is the absolute best application to use a synchro box and that shock absorber to get in and out of the hull for the very best performance.
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely. The way you hold a tap is often overlooked, and you're absolutely right. You hear that they'll blame the tap, but you haven't given the tap a fair chance.
No, we can solve problems day after day with the back end of the product rather than the front end of the product. It is a cooperation. It goes hand in hand. So if you improve that and then put the best product in the world in the front of it, you're going to get a happy customer. You're going to get something that sometimes they've never seen before. So I've seen customers struggling to tap M2, M3, M4, okay, at 200 or 300 revs because they've moved down the range to actually produce a thread at all. And when I've left, they're producing that thread at 2,500 RPM.
Sure.
All right, it's just night and day. Completely night and day.
And I know you're really excited about this next product.
Yeah, this is the last product, if you like, that's come along from DC. So this is the latest product, and as we said earlier, RTS, it absolutely must be run with a synchro technology from your machine tool. QTAP, which is to say is the very latest, all right, is a universal, truly universal product, which means it's multi-materialed. It's actually got a wider range of material than RTS even, which is incredible. And then on top of that, you can use it in a manual machine, an old Bridgeport. You can then put it into your tension and compression classical horizontal borer, and then you can go to your new Matsuura and put that product in, and away you go. And the results have been spectacular. And
it doesn't matter how you hold it.
It doesn't matter how you hold it, in the sense that we still recommend a synchro box, okay, in terms of rigid tapping. But obviously, if you're working manually, you're completely manual in that format. So, yeah, it's a product that I'm sure the kind of subcontract machine, different machines as well across the shop. So if you've got that mixture in your machine shop and mixture of materials, QTAP is a godsend.
Yeah, so if you've got the good old SME, thousands across the UK, stainless one day, Inconel, brass, bronze, whatever it may be, maybe that's a good place to start.
Absolutely. Maybe Inconel is a bit of a stretch if it's 718, but 625,
sure,
you're okay. Astalloys, yeah, your various ranges of stainless steels, and also your aluminiums and so on. So yeah, its scope is enormous, and we're going to be hopefully having a really good time, and the customers are going to have a good time with it.
Sure. So I guess what you're trying to say here is, you don't just want to sell a tap, you want to sell the solution, don't you? You want to sell the solution, and if you're doing stainless every day, it's probably not for you. If you're doing Inconel every day, it's definitely not for you. But if you're doing little bits of everything, and your conditions change within your machining environment, it's probably the place to start.
Yeah, it's another question along the road now that we're asking. Right at the very beginning of this video, we talked about the build-up of the picture, okay, and that's just something else that we're adding. What's your business, Mr. Customer? What type of business are you? So that we then can go to him and say, okay, well, this is another product that we have that we think is really suitable. So we make a recommendation. The customer may go in a slightly different direction within the DC portfolio, because he might say that he wants to be more specific. All right, what that tool does, and RTS does, is make sure that there's no contamination from the operator, so he can't potentially pick up a stainless tap and put it into aluminium and have a problem.
Yeah, I can see from your passion, it's obviously something you're excited about. So I do urge the people at home, get in touch with DC Swiss for your, not just tapping, but your threading, not even problems. Give them a chance to reduce your cycle times, improve your throughput, improve your profitability of your business, I guess, Ian. So, I appreciate your time today, and we'll see you all soon.
Thank you.